Welcome to the final movie on transmission end play and brake band play. First we're going to do the transmission end play that you need to do on the stub right here at the exit of the housing. This is the parking gear. You can see it has a little bit of play in it, but we're going to compensate that by putting the tailpiece on and by putting a shim here. Now, why do you have transmission end play? Production tolerances on the house, all the drums and the shafts mean that your distances are never completely identical. You can be a little bit below nominal size or a little bit above nominal size, and to make sure nothing goes loose and to make sure that when the entire driveline grows, it's not going to get itself shut, you have a certain end play that you need to correct with a shim. Another reason to correct end play after an overhaul is that as all those needle bearings in the driveline have been wearing in on the drums, you may actually see that your entire driveline shortens a bit by like a few tenths of a millimeter. Reason enough to check end play whenever you do a full rebuild. We will first position the straight edge in such a way that it's absolutely straight on the machine face of the housing. Now with my finger I push the parking gear all the way in because it has some play, and with my caliper I can now measure this distance to my straight edge and that distance of the housing to my straight edge, and by subtracting that number from this number I get a certain number which I need to write down. Let me get pen and paper here. So let's take a look. I am going to measure now, pushing that parking gear back in, and that's about 9.8 minus 5.19, so that's about 4.6 millimeter on the housing. Let's remember that 4.6. Be back in a second because now we're going to do the output flange. Okay, right here we have the tailpiece, and on the tailpiece we want to measure this machine face to my straight edge and that machine face to my straight edge. So let's put down the straight edge. I got pen and paper right here. 14 point something, that's 14.27, and that's 11.26. Let me get that down. 14.27, 11.26, and that's about 3 millimeters on the output shaft. Now, okay, back at the table with some of the shims and my caliper. We had about 4.6 on the housing and about 3 on the output shaft. So that gives us 1.6 millimeters of play. According to the ZF book, let me check this out, they want to have 0.15 to 0.35 final end play. So let's say if we would get somewhere between 1.2 and 1.5 shim something, we'd be good. So let's have a look. My caliper is on 0, 1.8 shim, 2.2 shim, another 1.8 shim, and we have the 1.4 shim. Now let's do the calculations. We had 1.6 and we want to between 15 and 35. So if we take the 1.8 off the 2.6, we would actually, of 1.6 we would actually go negative, so that's not possible. But if we take this 1.4 shim, we would end up with 0.2, and 0.2 is within spec. So with this 1.4 shim, subtracting 1.4 from my 1.6 final play, I end up with 0.2 play, which is within the 0.15 to 0.35 that ZF wants you to have. So let's move that housing a bit away from the edge of that box. We have the shim in position. Now you see why you measure the machine face, because the shim is positioned on that machine face. We now take the tailpiece. We now slot in that tailpiece. Yeah, and intentionally I didn't put the O-ring in yet because I want to take this tailpiece off, and this is just for the video. And now with the tailpiece, we move the tailpiece on to the gearbox until it sits. And now I'm going to take just one bolt and bolt it down. so it stays in position. And that's our transmission end play corrected. I needed the 1.4 shim. Okay, so we're done with the tailpiece, but now we still have the brake band to check. We have the actuation of the brake band right here, and the brake band sits behind where I position my clock. This is the only place where I can position the clock, since this is a steel part and the magnetic base wants to touch a steel part. This is a custom part my father made for me. This is a piece of steel with some holes drilled through and some 10mm bolts that will grab into the thread where you normally have your valve body. We then have two nuts welded on through which we can screw and unscrew a bolt, and that bolt will actuate the brake band. To do this test, you first want to feel that your brake band is loose. I have a loose brake band. Now I want to put the bolt in all the way. That means my brake band is getting tension. And at some point you will feel you cannot use any reasonable force anymore. At that moment you should also feel a brake band fully blocked. Alright. It's very heavy now, so I don't want to continue. I'm really compressing those springs that are in this mechanism. And now I want to feel with my finger. And I have a completely stuck brake band, so that's good. Now I want to put the dial approximately on 0, so it looks nice. Now we are going to unscrew until we feel the brake band moving again. And that's the play that we have. Because if the brake band can move, the drum in the brake band can move too. And it's lubricated, so the contact doesn't really matter. So now we start unscrewing. And you see the dial moving. The brake band is still very stiff. Absolutely no movement on the brake band. We are at 0.2 millimeters now. 0.4 millimeters. We need to go above 1 for sure. 0.8, still no movement in the brake band. We are approaching the 1 millimeter. That's 1 millimeter right now, still no movement. 1.10, 1.20. Very, now maybe not. 1.30, 1.40. Now I've got some movement. 1.50, yeah, definitely movement on the brake band. 1.60. Absolutely, yes, I can see the brake band move again. Let's see what happens if we go to like 170. Yep, brake band is definitely movable. Let's go a bit back to 1.6. Yes, the brake band moves at 1.62. Reason why that 1.6 is important for me. The clearance that you need to feel here is between 1.35 and 1.7. That's what ZF wants. And I'm at 1.6, so I am within the 1.7 maximum. That means the tensioning of the brake band is fine. So right, with my end play corrected, with my brake band play within spec, my gearbox is ready to be for the final assembly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to clean the edge here, the mating surface where my gasket is going to be. I'm going to use a vacuum and some sandpaper. Then I'm going to put the valve body back in. Then I'm going to put the filter back in. I'm going to show you how to put 2 O-rings on the filter. And then you could put your pan on it. I'm not going to put the pan on it in the video, because I'm going to sand blast my pan and I'm going to spray paint the pan. But if you've gotten this far with your rebuild, I'm sure you can put that pan on yourself. I've torqued these bolts down close to 80 Newton meters, one by one. I just put the right tension that you'll feel with your hands on these 30mm bolts. The bolts of the pump. Don't forget those little rubber rings, the metal rubber rings under them, and don't forget your pump O-ring. The bolts on the pump need to take 10 Newton meters, but I guess you could do a tiny little bit more. Alright, so let's get that mating surface cleaned up, and then let's get that valve body in. Our valve body has a guide pin, which you mustn't forget. We then pre-position the valve body, but we don't actually fully put it in position yet. The reason for this is I also need to replace these two O-rings on our plug. Although this transmission doesn't really leak from these O-rings, and neither do the 5HP24, the 19 and the 30. The newer transmissions, the 6 HPs, do actually have leaks on the plug, and you can get a different plug for this. But as I said before, in this gearbox we're just replacing it to have a good complete overhaul. My fingers are a bit greasy, so I can just lubricate those two O-rings. There we go. Now we're going to raise the valve body, put the plug through until it seats properly. We want to hear it click, we want both of those O-rings to grab. Then we are going to put that clamp on the plug on the bottom. And when that has been taken care of, we want to align the piston right here with the notch of the selector. If you do not align the piston in the notch and you are moving your selector, your piston will actually be pushed around, but it won't do anything. So, raise up the valve body, pull the plug through, position the plug and the selector. Let's just move that selector a little bit. Okay, so selector is going to go easy. Going to move the wiring harness down, putting my finger through the plug hole. Ow, that's on my finger, never mind. With my finger in that plug hole, I should be able to wiggle that. Yes, I can. Okay, summarizing. I've got my plug in. I've got that clip on the plug, and the edges of the clip actually go through the plug, and then the notch that you see and the notch that you see right here and right here actually grabs into the plug and grabs on the housing. That's how the plug stays secure. And those two O-rings, I've got the old ones right here. The two new O-rings actually seal the plug so no oil can splash through. Now what we want to do is fix the valve body. Remember how we made that bolt plan in a piece of cardboard? So now what we do is we take the bolts out, we make sure there is no cardboard junk on them, and we bolt them into the valve body. And now that I have all bolts in position, I'm going to put some pre-tension on them by using a ratchet. And now, with all the bolts of the valve body in position, mind you, I put that small bolt up here, but it's behind the valve body right here, so I made a little mistake. With all those bolts in position, you need to put about 10 Newton meters on them, but that's so little. I guess if you just go with your gut feeling, you should be alright. And just to make sure you don't make a mistake, the bolt plan that we still have here on cardboard, which is now empty, tells us exactly which ones we need to put on that 10 Newton meter. Next up is the filter. We need to put the filter on. Here you have the filter. This is actually a Filtron, which is original. There's a lot of discussions on these 5HP18 filters. A lot of people say that if you do not use Filtron, you're going to be in trouble. They all look the same. They're all dimensioned properly. I have used, on this gearbox, I have used Fabi filters and some kind of other German brand. And the third filter that I actually did, I was doing an oil change every year, that's why. The third filter that I used was this Filtron type filter. I noticed no issue at all with the Fabi filter or the other filter. Actually, the 5HP24 in my wife's Jaguar has a Fabi filter and is doing just fine. No noises, no issue. I personally think that whoever started the entire filter bullshit on the internet is actually somebody who misplaced a filter somehow, or who screwed up on an O-ring. And then did it right the second time and then just simply blames the filter. A trick that you could use here is you take the old O-ring, you put the old O-ring, which is a bit stretched out, on the neck, and then you push it down so it's all the way on the bottom, which is actually pretty unnecessary, like it shouldn't be here. Then you take the new O-ring, you put the new O-ring over it in the O-ring groove like this, and you can put the filter on your valve body just like this with an extra O-ring, and that extra O-ring will actually sit right here. So if for whatever reason the first O-ring leaks, you also have a second O-ring. I got this from a 5HP18 manual that I read many years ago. Before we're going to put that filter in, I'm going to get those bolts. And I gotta be quick here, because since we're putting a little bit of stress by using that second O-ring that we shouldn't, because it's not original, I want to bolt this filter down the moment I've got it in position, which is like right here. And now I'm just going to give it a few turns here, and give it a few turns on the middle and the rear, so that I have that filter in position. And now I need to push it in until you feel that O-ring grabbing. And that's the filter. Now the filter officially also needs like 10 or 15 Newton meters, but if you give it a nice twist with your fist, like this on a small ratchet, you'll be alright. Alright, aside from the pan gasket, the pan, and those bolts that you need to put in place here, this is the 5HP18 rebuild. I hope you're happy about these movies and that they help you. Whether you're doing a 5 HP or 4 HP or any kind of conventional automatic gearbox, basically they're all the same. The only exception is the GM boxes with special pistons, the 4 and the 5 speed from the end of the 90s. It took me over pretty much a year to make this entire movie about the 5 HP18. I'm gonna try and sell this one, not very expensive, I don't really mind. It's an old box, and although I repaired it, there's not much demand for these boxes anymore. So if you're interested in a 5 HP18 BMW V8 version, maximum clutches, maximum steels, let me know. And next up is a 5 HP30 that I have right here, a 5 HP24. I have an Asian one, a 5-speed Volvo box I'm going to do. I also have a 3-speed box. I think I'll do that one first. So there will be more on my YouTube channel. I hope you subscribe and I hope you watch my movies in the future.